Fox Business Network, I'm not sure if this is Fox Business or Fox News, but one of the Fox networks spoke to some Trump supporters at his rally in Georgia. And they're doing this to see what they think of the election and to see where they're at. And it's just as bad, if not worse, than you thought it would be.
Believe this was a free and fair election?
No. I think a blind man could see this was not a free election. It was not an honest election. I'm 72 years old. I never thought I'd live to see this kind of corruption.
That video we saw that happened in Atlanta, you can't tell me that was just them doing their job. Those were big, fat, humongous suitcases stuffed with probably copied ballots that they did, the Democrats or the liberals, and they told the people to leave at 11 o'clock. For 2 hours, they had time to count all those ballots without anybody watching them. Then if you see the graphs at between 11 and 1 o'clock, there you saw that blue little spike from Biden.
It's the most rigged election ever. And politicians getting bought off. It's a very transparent election because we can see who not to vote for and who needs to get it.
Was this a free and fair election?
No! It's the largest coup that ever has happened in the history of mankind. The greatest country in the world, the United States, has been invaded by social media giants, tech giants, China and Russia, all trying to seize our country and makes it into a Marxist socialist country.
Well, what do you say to the rhinos who are calling for President Trump to give up the fight?
Traitors. Sorry. Traitors. Very traitorous. Stick to your party. Support the head of your party, which is President Trump, and stand up for your constituents and the people that elected you.
Ask them, has China bought them? Are they owned by China just like Joe Biden's owned by China? I mean, it seems to make sense to me. Follow the money, man.
They're all worried about their own personal agenda. But you know what? They're going to be the first ones out if this goes either way. They're going to be gone.
Man. You can't say, even when Trump is being his most silly, you can't say that has no impact because it actually has a colossal impact. And his most hardcore, fervent supporters believe every word he says. And so when he goes on these long tweet rants where it's rigged election, fraudulent election, and he's, tweeting these out of context 15-second videos of some supposedly shady shit going on, this is reaching a giant audience. Now, admittedly, this audience might, maybe 30% of the country, like the real hardcore Trump people. But that's a lot of people. When you do the math on it in a country of like 330 million, 340 million people, 30% of that's a lot of people. I'm going to try to do the math because I suck at math. But that's a lot of people. So, one of my instincts is like just laugh and like look at it and be like, you're so ridiculous. Like everything you're saying is so silly. It's so absurd. It's obviously incorrect. But a lot of people don't see that. They don't realize that. They think that he's the crusader for truth standing up against, the deep state and the swamp. And no, he's lying to you. He's definitely lying to you. Maybe he's convinced himself that his lies are truth as well, but he's not correct with the things he's saying. So I'm going to get to this point in a second, but like I'm mad at everybody because there's no way we could have gotten to this point here where you have people giving these answers unless there's a failure at like every level of society. So again, I'll get back to that point in a second, but let's just go through some of what they said here. One of the guys was like, the numbers went up for Biden between 11 and 1 a.m. Yeah, and if you read a single article before the election about how the votes were going to roll in, you would have known that's when a lot of these states were beginning to count their mail-in ballots. And it's no surprise that they went massively for Joe Biden because, number one, mail-in ballots historically go more for Democrats than Republicans in the first place. And number two, they went even more for Biden because Donald Trump was telling people, don't do mail-in votes. So it's like they caused this problem, and then they're like, can you believe there's a problem? Yeah, of course I can. You caused it. Your guy was saying, don't do mail-in votes. Like, what are you talking about? And you get the sense that even if you give these people that fact, and I was on Rogan and I told everybody this, and I said it a number of times. I said it over and over and over. And even given the fact that I was telling people beforehand, and there were articles pointing this out beforehand, there's still so many people who are just like, no, must be rigged, must be fake. But if it's rigged, if it's fake, how did I know it was going to happen beforehand? It's not that hard to read these things through. Yeah, when you count the votes on election day, Trump's going to have a small lead because Republicans vote more on election day. Once you start counting the mail-ins, of course it's going to flip. Of course you're going to get way more Biden votes. And so did Trump build up a big enough lead where he could hold off, the charge of counting the mail-in votes? The answer was no. But they bring it up like it's so nefarious. Oh my God, the later votes all broke for Biden. Yeah, we knew that was going to happen. One of the guys says, this is the most rigged election ever, and the politicians are bought off. See, that's the other thing that bothers me about this, is that, and this is like the Alex Jones thing too, like he'll say something that has a tiny grain of truth in it, and that truth is enough to hook people into the lie also. So I don't think this person is lying, because I think they believe it's the most rigged election ever, but like, the politicians being bought off part is totally true, but like, Trump actually winning the election is utter nonsense, and that didn't happen. Somebody says, oh, it's the largest coup. Really? The largest coup of all time? Okay. And then they go on to somewhat true criticism of like social media and tech giants. They're like, yeah, they're micromanaging and controlling the process and controlling the narrative and trying to, censor certain things and deplatform certain things and put warnings on Twitter. That's all true. But then they go into crazy land and they're like, and China and Russia and all these other countries want Biden, and the whole point is to make us a Marxist socialist country. They went from like a somewhat legit criticism of like big tech controlling the dialogue and the narrative and censoring. That's kind of true, and I'm against any sort of censorship. But then they go right to, and therefore like, Biden is Xi Jinping's puppet and Vladimir Putin's puppet. And it's like, these guys, they were never actually like against Russiagate in principle. They just would rather be Russiagating the Democrats. You know what I mean? Like, it's McCarthyism no matter what. It's McCarthy smears no matter what. When the Democrats do it to Trump and pretend like he's a Manchurian candidate when he wasn't, or now they're doing this to Biden and acting like, I love the other conspiracy theories. Oh, the Dominion voting machines are made in like Venezuela and Cuba. So really, it's Maduro who wanted Joe Biden to win. That's what's going on here, is you have this international communist plot to get Biden elected by them rigging the voting machines up front, as if like Maduro is such close ally of Biden or something, when Biden's going to continue the efforts to try to overthrow Maduro. I mean, these people are living on another planet. The idea that this corporatist neoliberal is somehow in agreement with communism, like what? And then they're calling the other Republican politicians who aren't standing up for Trump now traitors. And my response to that is, you guys created a monster, man. You really did. You guys created a monster, and now you don't know how to deal with it. The other Republican politicians fed this every single step of the way. Fox News fed this every single step of the way. And now you don't know how to control this Frankenstein. That's what's happening. And, the funny thing is, they get criticism correctly from the left, too, which is like they're totally chicken shit in that they like half go along with Trump's lunatic rantings on this. You know what I mean? Like, they will not actively stand up. Very few of them actively stand up and say, you're full of shit. The election's over. You lost. A lot of them do like this, let me make some talking points. Let me have some talking points that are kind of in agreement with Trump, but also never fully say what he's saying, like rigged election, fraudulent. So, like, there's criticism from the left, which is more accurate. But funny enough, even though they're trying to appease this monster now, it's not going to work because they want you to like really go all in, rigged election, fraudulent, Trump won, Trump should be in office, we need to keep him there no matter what. It doesn't matter if we literally do a coup ourselves and overthrow the results of the election. So, but this is what happens, man. You guys created a monster, now you don't know how to deal with it. Let me get back to the point that I told you I would get back to. I'm mad at everybody. So, of course, I'm mad at Trump for being a pathological liar, saying things that are not true, denying and downplaying and rejecting the legitimacy of the election. In a heartbeat, if he had the military on his side and the military was like, we're going to keep you in power, he'd be like, cool, I'm going to stay in power. This guy doesn't care at all about principles or democracy or peaceful transition of power or rule of law. He's a malignant narcissist, and he can only see things through the lens of, does it benefit me or does it not benefit me? And this was embarrassing to him, and he would do anything to override that embarrassment, including staying in power. So, like, I hate him for that reason, for kind of bringing us to this crisis point and perpetually keeping us in this crisis point. So, of course, I hate him. I hate the Republicans for being chicken shit in the face of what he's doing. But then also, and here's the most important point, not only do I blame Fox News for creating the monster and now not knowing how to control it, I actually blame mainstream media as well. Now, you might say, well, hold on now. Mainstream media is not, fostering this. If anything, they're trying to debunk it and everything now. Yeah, but you wouldn't have a situation where these people exist if the media wasn't so smug and elitist and wrong about everything in the first place. So in other words, you have a media that, for example, lied us into the Iraq War. You have a media that pushed Russiagate relentlessly and falsely accused President Trump of being a Manchurian candidate to Russia. You've lost all credibility. And so now when you're out there and you're like, guys, look, Trump actually lost. Biden won. We know that as a matter of fact. You're incorrect. Let me fact check you. These people don't want to hear it. And in part, they don't want to hear it because they're not that bright. But also in part, they don't want to hear it because why would anybody want to hear anything from you? You're smug, elitist clowns who've been wrong about everything, and you're on your high horse and you look down your nose at them. So there's been for us to get to this point with this diet sad coup attempt that has Benny Hill music in the background, for us to get to this point, there had to be a failure at every level of society. It had to be Trump, it had to be the Republican Party, it had to be the Democratic Party, it had to be conservative media, it had to be liberal media. It had to be every level of society. There was a giant breakdown to get to the point where the most insane outright lies and falsehoods are things that are actually casually believed because Trump has developed more trust in their eyes than the entire media apparatus and all of our institutions combined. That says a lot. That's a failure, not just of Trump and these people, but it's a failure of our institutions. And that's the part that nobody's going to reckon with, because it's so easy to just point your finger at this and say, evil, bad, stupid, dumb. Yeah, got it. Of course those things. But how did we get here? And if you don't care about how we got here, you're not really going to fix it. So there you have it, man. It's, fuck. It ain't pretty. There's a lot of people who believe these things. They'll never accept the legitimacy of the election. And we really are doing a long-term permanent damage to the health of our country. And I think that's pretty obvious to see.